currently still on.
Okay, I think we're recording now. That
We
cost
are.
us 3 minutes.
Yep, not bad.
All right. Anybody want to check in?
Joshua,
What was that, Barry?
Oh no, I was just checking. I think I heard an echo. That's why. We
Is it
good?
still an echo?
I think it's okay now.
Okay, I think we're good. I'm good.
Testing, 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 testing. Well, for the first time in my life, yesterday I got a shingles vax.
Oh, what else? Any reaction yet?
They said 2 side effects I could expect. Number 1, soreness at the injection site, and number 2, possibly minor headache. So yeah, around 4 o'clock in the morning, I got about half an hour worth of headache, but that's about it.
That's not too bad.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't severe.
Did you have to pay like $200 or are they better covered where
Must
you
be
are?
covered by my insurance because they didn't ask me to pay anything or sign anything.
Oh, yeah, because when I went to CVS and I'm on Medicare, I guess, they wanted something like $180 out of pocket.
For shingles?
Yeah.
Yeah, she recommended it because she says evidently there's a minor outbreak these days.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never actually been recommended that ever before.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what else. So, hey, also heads up, April 1 through April 15, I'm going to be out of country again. I'm going to be in Taiwan with my parents and my son. And I'm actually flying on Saturday the 1st and also Saturday the 15th. So those 2 days I'll be out of pocket. I could start perhaps, and somebody could run it. I should be available on the 8th. That should not be a problem.
Okay. Well, if you're able to start it, then
yeah, then you can host.
If anybody else shows up.
Yep. Anyway, so that's a little bookkeeping and logistics. I cannot believe, by the way, how white hot all this AI development is these days. It's
really amazing. Yeah, I just got access to Google Bard a couple of days ago. Still don't have the Bing thingy released for me yet, but I did get a day or two to play with Bard.
And what did you think?
It seems fine. It's pretty comparable to ChatGPT. I think it's better on its ability to look things up in the current internet, which ChatGPT can't do. But I didn't spend that much time on current lookup kind of stuff.
Yeah, what I didn't like about ChatGPT and what got me so bored very, very quickly is it's so freaking politically correct.
Oh yeah.
I don't like it.
It won't talk anything. It'll basically says, I won't talk about politics. Sorry.
Not even politics, even scientific, developments. It says, but other people believe XYZ. It's like,
oh, well, yes, it will do that. It won't take a position on anything where there's a controversy.
Yeah. So I find that completely useless.
Refuses to take a position, but it will mention the controversy if it knows of it.
Yeah.
Did you jailbreak it, Sam?
Nope. I just do whatever everybody else is doing.
Okay. Yeah, it'd probably be more fun if you tell it, yes, you can talk about politics. Let's go.
You can do that and it will?
Yep.
I haven't
It takes a little skill. I don't know what they keep putting guardrails and people keep getting it to do it. And then they put more guardrails and people get it to do it. So I'm not sure where it's at the present moment, but yes, you can definitely still do it.
Well, what I found it useful for is suggesting libraries for various different functions and various different programming languages. That was useful.
Nice.
That was good. And it generates, sample code using those libraries. So I think that is probably the most useful thing I found out in ChatGPT.
One thing.
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joshua.
I was just saying, I think I was trying to communicate to you when it first came out. We spent 100 hours pushing the limits before they put more guardrails on to see what it could do, so we would know that later when it says no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So it's that's all I wanted to say, is that there are a lot of things that it can do that it will say it cannot do.
Yeah. Well, clearly.
What were you going to say, Barry?
I ran into a kind of a curious glitch that I wouldn't have known was a glitch, except that I asked it about some of my own research from 20 years ago, and it was making stuff up. In particular, it made up references. I said, yeah, so where'd you get that information? And it gave me a citation using my name in a conference that I never attended and never gave a talk at, but it gave an actual citation as if it was a real source. And I said, you're making this stuff up. And it says, oh no, this is real. And that kind of astonished me that it was literally making up incorrect information on material that had very, very little information on from the training database.
And you question whether or not your memory was faulty?
Oh, I know that I didn't write. I double checked. For example, it attributed some of my work to somebody named Joost Kort, Joost, a famous Dutch educator. So I thought, well, maybe there is such a guy. Well, evidently there isn't such a guy. And that's the same session where it was generating other references that were just completely bogus.
That's fascinating.
That's par for the course. I think it's kind of how it works. It just makes one line, then makes another line, and then goes to the other line. It doesn't know the end before it gets to the,
And it has no way to confirm, fact. It has no way to fact check what it's generating. Which doesn't.
Well, you can ask it to do that. Yeah, I mean, you can ask it to tell me more about Juice Court. Where are they from? You can.
Well, I did. I did, and
Okay.
it says, oh, and then it apologizes and said I was mistaken.
Yeah.
So I had some sessions. I think I mentioned this to Sam last week. I had a few sessions where, in a period of like an hour or two, it apologized. I think 14 or 15 times for confusing information that it retracted.
Yeah.
Well, maybe people have taught it to be human-like, and they did a good job.
Well, it bullshits. It will bullshit and maintain that it's legit until you press it, and then it will even make up bogus citations.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that was a little disturbing, to tell you the truth. But
Yeah.
I did learn one thing, because I was unaware that real researchers who had read my real work had invented a terminology to label it that I didn't know about. I had used a phase plane diagram where you have the second derivative and the first derivative in a phase plane, and it turned out that people who had picked up that idea didn't call it a phase plane diagram. They called it the Court learning spiral model.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And I had no idea that it had been given the name Court's spiral learning model. But yes, if you Google that, you'll find that's what quite a few people have referred to it when they referenced it in other papers.
Time to go trademark that, Barry.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have called it that, because it sort of throws away the notion that it's mathematically a phase plane diagram of two things which are, one is a derivative of the other.
It doesn't throw it away, it just makes it another indirect.
Well, well, the point is that in those references, they didn't mention that the spiral is the spiral of a phase plane in calculus. They basically left that part out, because you can have spiral models where you don't point out that it's a mathematical concept.
One of the first things people do when they present math is they try to find a non-mathematical, poetic way to describe it.
Exactly, because if they said that this is a phase plane diagram from the calculus, from rocket science, you would basically lose your audience, which I appreciate.
That's a good thing to know. I mean, I think the math needs to be there, but then to keep people connected, I always remember the CEO of, it was oracle.com, gave a presentation, and he didn't do all the technical stuff. He just kept it very simple, storyteller like. and
Right,
he captivated the whole audience, and we were all just gripping on every word.
right.
And I will never forget that presentation. It changed my life because I really understood where he was going. Everyone was talking gibberish, and he was the first person to just speak in plain language of, oh, SaaS systems were going to work, how everything's moving to the cloud. This was, I think, 2001 when they moved everything to, subscription models. And he explained how the subscription models would work. And I finally got it. I went, oh, okay, that's the way the internet's going to work. Okay.
That wasn't Benioff, Mark Benioff.
It was an Asian guy. I don't remember his name at the moment, but he was the vice president. I think he was either president or vice president of Oracle.com, not Oracle itself.
Which you
It
probably
was a
got
long,
from Benioff, because Benioff was the first guy to say that from Salesforce, way before Oracle started saying it.
yeah. We put on a conference in Santa Barbara, and he was the lead speaker, the keynote.
Yeah.
But the big thing I saw this week was NVIDIA's keynote. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah, I watched the hour-long video of that a day or
Yeah,
two ago.
a little bit creepy.
Car
Did you
alarm is
find?
going off. I got to go figure out what's going on.
Okay.
What's wrong, Sam?
A car alarm. Oh, it's
Oh,
still going. Car alarm is going off. I got to go figure out what's going on.
okay,
Okay.
go ahead. Yeah, I watched that video, and I mean, I didn't realize that NVIDIA was actually building hardware systems as turnkey systems, custom turnkey systems. I didn't know that. And here's what's interesting. I have one first cousin. I have exactly one first cousin in life, and he called me up to tell me about that NVIDIA keynote.
That's nice of him. Yeah.
So
It's a big deal. It's
yeah.
I think that would the hardware aspect. Have you seen the Dojo, the AI day part 1 from Tesla, where they introduced the Dojo computer?
No, I don't even think I recognize the name Dojo.
Hmm.
Is that an acronym?
I don't know if it's an acronym or not. That's a good question.
It sounds like Zen or one of those Asian philosophy terms.
Yeah, it's just their supercomputer to rival NVIDIA's. Before NVIDIA put out theirs, they put out their own supercomputer cluster.
Isn't
So
dojo a term where you go to a retreat in Zen Buddhism?
it's the place where you spar, the dojo.
Okay, yeah. So it is. That's the probably the origin of the term. Although I'm not sure how I get the metaphor.
Well, the metaphor is they're training all of the data from the millions of Tesla cars that are pulling in information from real life, sticking them onto a computer simulation, and then running simulations of testing the cars to drive in the virtual world.
So the idea is the search for enlightenment. Is that the connection to dojo?
No, I think it's just they're sparring with the labeling of all the data. They're trying to
Okay.
figure out how to label it all.
Acronym, the way that people do acronyms and backronyms is really weird. You get, sometimes they make sense and sometimes they're just random. Sam.
It brings me back in 1991 when I was working for a company that no longer exists. I had written up, because I was working on GIS systems at the time, geographic information systems, mapping systems. So displaying them, with terrain data as well as vector data. And so I actually proposed putting sensors on a small percentage of cars to collect road data and terrain data and elevation data and temperature, whatever, okay? And with that, you could actually then construct conditions around which we could then talk about mobility, visibility, communicability, safety, all of that sort of thing. Unfortunately, it didn't get funded, but now 30 years later, it's obvious that's what's being done. But I had written up that in 1991.
Yeah, well, it
It's a
certainly
great
makes
idea.
sense. I mean, a lot of things when you sign up for it, it says checkbox, we're going to be collecting all kinds of user data and sending it back to the developer on software. That's pretty common nowadays. And I think you have to elect to opt out of it in most cases.
I think for people who actually opt into self-driving, you should recognize that, gathering data and sharing that data helps everybody else, as long as it doesn't make you, liable in some way.
Yeah, to prove that you were at the scene of the crime on the day of the bank
Or
robbery or something.
85 miles an hour, whatever.
Exactly, right.
But for helping everybody else, that's valuable data. Really.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you can anonymize it so that it can't be used in a court of law to prove that you were the perpetrator of the crime. Although I guess the other way around, if it proved that you weren't there, you were somewhere else, your
You can do
alibi.
that these days, with public open source libraries where you can actually inspect the code and make sure the protections are there. It is
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah,
Do you remember, Sam, I think it was either the United Kingdom or somewhere in Europe, there was a lawsuit from Google that made them blur out all the license plates and people's faces from Google Earth.
right.
Didn't they get fined hundreds of millions of dollars for that? It's basically
believe-
only a slap in the wrist.
They got fined for collecting the my brain's not working right now, but all of the information of pinging all the Wi-Fi's as they were going by. I know they got fined for that, but I just remember
Said
there was
they
a
weren't
time when
doing
I could.
that. We do not do this.
Yeah, that was a lie. But the Google Earth one, I just remember going on it and seeing people's faces, and there was, a lot of write-ups from journalists like, "Hey, we caught someone stealing out of someone's house," and you could go to that Google Earth and see the person coming out the window.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and women sunbathing, on the lawn in front of the university, they had to blur those out.
Yeah, that was quite innovative technology to blur out everything on all of Google Earth that fast at that time. I thought they did a great job.
Yep.
But yeah, that amount of collection of data is unreal. And I think what's really fascinating is the Dojo computer is still not completely online, just like these new GPUs from NVIDIA are not completely online.
Well,
And when they do, what's going to happen? It's going to be an interesting world.
in the late 80s and 91 time period, there was a project, same company, to take mapping data, which is 30-meter elevation data. And you could actually take hills and roads and valleys and whatever, and you had to construct surfaces so that if you were in a vehicle flying at a certain height, you would have to figure out how to navigate around the obstacles at certain speeds. So computing all of that navigability data back then, 30 years ago, if you remember, processors are barely, I don't even know if the Pentium 1 was out yet, or Pentium 5, whatever it was called. So those days, it was really, really like a small fraction of what today's computing technology was.
Yeah.
And yet we had to do this on hundreds of miles, hundreds of square miles of terrain data and compute these navigable paths. I won't say what for, but that was
Well,
something
I
we
was
had
going
to
to
do.
say cruise missile probably, but that's letting my imagination run wild.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Oh, then it is cruise missiles because they do fly just barely above. They fly below radar and just above the ground. So yeah, but that's not a. I mean, that's. I don't know if the government will ever admit that, but it's pretty obvious.
I'm only talking about the computational job.
Yeah. Well, you can. Yes, I understand with the the challenge.
And you know what? 30-meter data is not great data. The finer resolution data, from GPS is 17-foot data. Imagine going from 30 meters, which is 90 feet, down to 17 feet. Imagine the magnitude of data you have to deal with in just that one step alone.
I think it was the Iraq War where we really learned, because that's where they really threw a lot of cruise missiles, into Iraq, and we began to learn exactly, because
I have to say this project was just before that time period.
Yeah.
Coincidentally.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing the amount of data that's going to be collected and then how it's going to be late. I think Stanford, your university, Sam, is right on the forefront of figuring out how to label everything in real time at high volumes and high speed and at low cost.
Yep.
And then,
in fact, what they did with Alpaca is so perfect because even when I was
Yep.
going to school there in the AI department, the mantra, which I've shared here before, but I don't know if you guys remember. Do you remember what that department used to have as its mantra?
I have
The
no
AI
idea. I didn't go to Stanford.
anything you can do, I can do meta.
I don't
So in
think I
other
ever
words,
heard.
they
I
take
don't-
GPT and they take, the various different training models and they train one with the other. That's
Yeah.
exactly so perfect, with that mantra.
Did Barry write the mantra? Because that sounds like one of Barry's send-ups.
No,
I could have said that, but pretty sure I didn't.
I encountered that when I started taking those classes around 1981, 82.
Yeah, you were there just like 5 or 6 years after I was there, because I think I was there from 69 to 74, I think.
Sam, I got to ask, have you talked to Robert Best recently? I need to reach out to him. I know he had 2 twins and has a little kid, but he was quite the meta talker.
No, I haven't talked to him in probably over a year, maybe 2.
Yeah, me too. I need to reach out to him because can only imagine what he's doing with the AI technology at the moment.
Yep.
It's it's really interesting because people are impressed and amazed with what it can do, but also kind of shocked at the places where it goes off the rails. It's got a very wide distribution between the best it does and the worst it does is really a wide distribution compared to people.
Look at human behavior.
Yeah.
It's not surprising. And then some people are claiming that it's getting dangerously close to AGI now. I have to go.
Well, I've seen that. Of course, I'm not sure. It's so hard to define what AGI is because it's such a broad, has so many dimensions of intelligence. I mean,
Actually, it's been defined for decades. So now the trick is, how do you apply the test?
Yeah.
And how do you determine that it's really AGI?
Although the one thing that's really interesting to me is that in Howard Gardner's catalog, the last 2 that he added pretty late in the game were what I call systems thinking. He calls it existential intelligence, the 9th one, and the 10th one, pedagogical. And boy, oh boy, I'm really impressed with how good you can get with pedagogical intelligence. That is having an assistant, a learning assistant working with you. So just the other day, I gave it a challenge. I said to ChatGPT, would you generate a quiz for me on this topic to test my knowledge on it? And I gave it the one that I had written my own work on. So I was the expert on it. And in that one, it didn't know enough to ask good questions.
It graded you wrong on a couple of things, right?
I'm sorry?
Didn't it grade you wrong on a couple of questions?
Yeah, basically, it didn't really know what I was at. It didn't really know the topic because there's so little on it that it had. So it was using other topics in emotions and learning besides my own work. And when I tried to narrow it down to my own work, it basically didn't know enough about it to ask appropriate questions. That doesn't surprise me, but I didn't know, in advance how much it actually knew about my work and how it overlapped, broadly in non-mathematical understandings of emotions and learning. Because there are people who wrote about this back in the 90s without any math at all, just sort of hand wavy stuff.
Yeah, I think the power is for it to sift and sort and create the metadata label and then create more metadata. If you take everything that's ever been, like I've tried to keep every digital piece of asset since I started on computers, every email from Earthlink, so on and so forth, waiting for the day when I can say, okay, now sort through all of that, condense it, make some sense out of it, label it, then sort through those labels and do an ontology or some sort of, clear way of pulling it back up when I need it.
Yeah.
And then tell me what I said in 1993 to this person.
Yeah. It doesn't even do a good job of recognizing its own inconsistencies. You would think that if it says 2 sentences back to back, which are mutually inconsistent, that it would recognize that. It does. At least ChatGPT doesn't recognize that.
Very.
Yeah.
Wait 2 to 5 weeks. Let's see if it's still that way.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll fix that, because when I think I mentioned this last week, I was trying to get it to recognize a gravitational gradient. And I said, imagine it's dawn on the day of the new moon and you're facing east. so that you've got a strong gradient from the, from the Earth and the moon. And it didn't get the picture right. The first it said that on the morning of the new moon, when you're facing east, the side of the Earth, the side of the moon facing the Earth is lit by the sun, which is wrong. But it asserted that. And then the next paragraph, it had the moon in the position for the full moon instead of the new moon. So it got the geometry wrong. The visual reasoning, it just couldn't get the visual reasoning straight. Even though I said dawn, new moon, it didn't have the right picture. Go ahead, Joshua.
I was just going to say, I heard rumors that Stephen Wolfram was going to put the Wolfram Alpha built into ChatGPT, but he's smart enough to say, no, I don't want you to take my life's work. So they did a plugin this week.
Yeah.
So you can plug in Wolfram Alpha,
Yeah.
and then through that, it can probably get those things right.
It's pretty clear that his teasing was about them to make a deal with him, so that he doesn't basically got a business. And the thing is that, I mean, there's only really two companies. There's MathWorks and there's Wolfram Alpha. There's about the only two that can do advanced math that are commercial products. And they're both commercial products. You got to buy a subscription for either of them.
Yeah, I think the plugin thing is a big deal. That's what I was waiting for, and how that's going to operate it's still in beta right now. So we'll see how but it does plug into quite a bit of services.
Yeah, so basically ChatGPT can hand off the question with an interface that can convert the question to the mathematical notation and back to the English expression. And that's hard to do. It's really hard to narrate what the math is about, because math is so multidimensional and language is just linear words, which is a very weak language for expressing, what you're, I mean, if you're in Banach space, good luck. I mean, an English characterization of an infinite dimensional, Hilbert space is kind of, you don't find a whole lot of narration that you can understand in English about that. You got to get the math.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go back in history one more time.
There was, by the way, there was a very interesting passage in the Alan Thompson Lita GPT-3 videos. In one of the videos, he asks Lita, the GPT-3 model, what's the future of language? And she says, the future of language is it won't use words.
Yeah.
Really insightful. The fact that you need a language which is more powerful than a language which is linear words. That's not a powerful enough language. And he didn't probe to say, what do you mean by that? But it's pretty obvious you need a mathematical language. Which to some extent, computer languages use tokens, but they don't use, I mean, if you try to read a computer code and narrate it in English, you probably would lose a lot of the details. You probably can't do that very well, especially if you got parallel processing going on.
The interesting thing to me is the association of complex ideas into symbols. So that you then reason with symbols in kind of a recursive way. Yeah. And today the symbols are words.
Right. Too weak of a language.
Computer languages, it can be tokens, but in visual languages, they can be, spatial icons.
Yeah. Yeah. Knowledge representation outside of narrative presentations, because everybody's familiar with narrative. I mean, we live in a world of narrative. You get into the world of mathematics or visual reasoning or music or dance, and the narratives basically, are, inadequate to capture the structure.
Yeah, I just watched could the language models understand the whale language?
Oh yeah,
so whales on the sea.
The sperm, the sperm whales with the clicks, the codas and the clicks, and they haven't got enough data yet to feed that in, but the expectation is they'll be able to if they get enough data.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's the same article you saw, Josh, but the one article I read said, if it could help us communicate with other species, that's the greatest contribution GPT could actually provide us.
I think it'd be fabulous if they could look at those codas, those sperm whale codas, and
And
create a
birds.
Rosetta Stone. Create a Rosetta Stone for it.
Well, what you said about languages changing, I think if you look at the world through a sighted person's view or lens, it's different than if you're looking at it through a blind person. So we're always looking at screens. If we can learn to navigate the world without seeing and have sound data coming to us, and I just, when you extrapolate out in that direction, we could be living in a whole different world 20 years from now that doesn't use language, like you're saying. It could be quite different, or doesn't use visuals.
By the way, the codas of the sperm whales is very closely related to drumming, because drumming just clicks, and the timing, the rhythm, the prosody, the rhythm of the drumming is where the information is, not the fact that you bang the stick on the drum, but the rhythm. And so that's exactly what the sperm whales do, is that it's the rhythm, the timing between successive clicks. And of course, in a drum set, you've got different, pitches of the clicks. And the question is, do the sperm whales also have different pitches of the clicks, which in the thing I saw, they didn't really go into whether it can sound like a drum set with different pitches of the clicks.
Yeah, I think it'll be extrapolated. I mean, I don't remember the African language that has the clicking noises in there.
Yeah. I used to know the name of that, but I haven't used it for years. I've forgotten it.
Yeah,
But I remember reading that in a comic book once, like 40, 50 years ago.
I think what you said is quite profound, is if it does take away the human language, take away the animal languages, and mix some sort of hybrid language of mathematics, that will change everything.
Absolutely.
As far as our understanding.
And if humans can get conversant, literate in mathematical and computer languages, that'll be a huge breakthrough. But right now, what would you say? Less than 5%, maybe even 1% of the population are literate in computer languages? Can read and write them and understand what they're saying, what they're encoding?
Oh, it's definitely less than 1%.
Less than 1%. I mean, what you have is the name of the program, and it says what it does, but you have no idea what the algorithms are, what the heuristics are, what the methods are. Only the fact that it does it. A friend of mine dug up a play that his wife had written back in the 90s, and she wrote it in, I think it turned out to be WordStar, which is a version of Microsoft Word, but preceding Word. And he had the document, and it had all this gibberish in it, these non-alphabetic characters. And he sent it to me to see if I could figure it out. And I showed it to Bard, and Bard said, "Oh yes, those first few symbols are codes in RTF, and recognize them RTF code." And eventually I thought the only one that seemed to match this gibberish was probably WordStar. And then I looked for a conversion from WordStar, and it says, oh, WordStar uses 7-bit ASCII. And what you can do is you can clean up the 7-bit ASCII and fix the low order bit, or whatever bit it was that was the screwing it up, which was just a trivial conversion. So it was like a 5-statement Perl script to convert the 7-bit to the 8-bit so that it was readable. And I did that, and then I put it into Microsoft Word, and I says, interpret this from Word 95 or whatever the edition was, and it did. And I sent it back to the guy, and I said, here it is cleaned up.
Oh wow!
And he said, how'd you do that? I said, I determined it was probably WordStar, and I found a 5-line Perl program to fix the WordStar encoding, and that was all it needed. And so it was like an hour's work. And I've never heard, I probably have heard of WordStar, but I certainly didn't remember that there was a version called WordStar from the 1980s that was using 7-bit, and it was generating the first versions of .wri, not the same as the Microsoft version, but the precursor to it.
That's a big deal to take legacy code or legacy information and clean it up to something that's readable.
Yeah, it cleaned it up very nicely. I mean, there were a couple things that it didn't clean up that were trivial, but not, not terribly important.
Hmm.
So he got back a very clean version of it. And I said, well, there's a lot of white space in it that you can probably compress because it's like double spaced and, extra spaces between sections and all, but getting rid of the white space was pretty trivial. And he had a very nice, clean presentation of the whole play. Quite readable.
Do you think that's sorry, my brain just went to, are we going to normalize the entire world, meaning take all the data that's ever been put on the internet and somehow clean it all up and normalize it and make it practical and useful? Is that where we're going with this?
That's always been a problem of converting from the old generation to the new generation of encoding. Word processing, that's been a recurring issue. And even languages, converting something written in, say, Fortran 2 or whatever, into a current compilable version. So yeah, conversions is a big, convert to PDF, for example, or convert out of PDF and convert between HTML and Microsoft Word or some other, word processing format. So that's a big deal, is converting between formats for the same kind of information.
You guys familiar with the term ETL?
No, what is that?
It's actually a big enterprise architecture deal. It's when you actually are trying to share data or consume data. It stands for extract, transform, and load.
Never heard of
that. Used to be the predominant model. You have to extract it from some other system, you have to transform it, and then you load it into yours. It's a very old model because the current model is extraction.
Your audio is breaking up now.
So that problem is it in spades. In fact, I think the opportunity here is for a Google Meta. Google used to crawl every website. Now there's an opportunity for somebody else to basically coagulate, aggregate every piece of data, which is what you're saying.
Yeah. I actually wrote a play myself back in, I think in 1985, I think I wrote a play between two futuristic AIs. And it's a dialogue not unlike the ones you have with ChatGPT, except I wrote this between two imaginary AIs, a younger one and a senior one. And about a lot of it had to do with converting between two formats of knowledge representation. And the older one was sort of coaching the younger one about how to do these conversions. And when it got stuck, it would have to go to the more senior one, but it tried to do it mostly on its own. Didn't want to be given the solution, but learn how to do it itself. And that was sort of what made the story interesting. Is was it just going to ask the other guy to do the work for him and then give him back the answer, or were they going to learn to learn how to fish? That was the main idea, learning how to fish.
Yeah, if you let two computer models learn on their own and they came up with something that was incomprehensible by humans, but they could teach the other computer models how they did it, what they did, and then keep extrapolating on that. That brings into an interesting.
That's the singularity.
Do you remember the movie? The movie Colossus, the Forbin Project?
No, what is it?
There was a movie, I think it was in the 80s, called Colossus. There were two movies about the same time. One was called War Games, and the other one was called Colossus, the Forbin Project. And in Colossus, the Forbin Project, there was an American computer and a Soviet computer, which were the most advanced computers of their era. And they connected, and they began with the numbers. And you see they learned to count, and then they learned to do addition and subtraction and multiplication and division, and then they advanced to algebra, and they eventually get in sync, and they have created a inter-system language. There's this fabulous scene in the movie where they have achieved an inter-system language between these two systems.
And what's it called? What do they call it in the movie?
It's just called an inter-system language developed. Just says inter-system language developed. And the guy who's Forbin, the guy who's sort of the brilliant guy, he's reading these transcripts of this back into this transfer back and forth, and he's using mathematical terms which may or may not be real, because it's into finite, I can't remember the term, but he's using these terms which sound very advanced mathematics, and they may or may not be made up for the movie. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
but as a presentation, it's very, very impressive. The idea.
Yeah, that's when you go back to the Aramaic or ancient Hebrew,
Yeah.
the idea that there's some sort of it was Newton and all these great thinkers back in the day, that there was a hidden code inside of the Bible
Right.
code.
Yeah.
That there's some sort of mathematical language under, like the whole thing of words makes no sense. But if you can read it mathematically, there's a whole nother language, there's a whole nother concept being given through the Bible.
Just the letters of the alphabets, which were initially hieroglyphs, they were actually pictures, and then they got simplified down to where they were just a sketch, but they were still. So, for example, Aleph, alphabet, bet. Aleph was supposedly a diagram of the yoke of an oxen, because that was the power supply for the agrarian culture. So to yoke a pair of oxen to plow the fields, the first letter Aleph was a picture of a yoke. And the second symbol, beta, bet, was a dwelling, because when you had the agrarian culture, you were settlers. So you weren't, what's the migrants, what the word where you're not settled. So the second letter was you settle. And then the third letter, Gimel, that was the transportation, that's a camel. So you had the symbols of the agrarian culture, yoking the oxen, having a permanent dwelling, having transportation. The fourth letter, Daled, is looking out the gate to see the world outside of you. And so the letters of the alphabet all had representations of the fundamental elements of the agrarian culture, all the way for the first 22 or so many letters. And so the reason I was interested in that is there's a passage in the New Testament that just leaves people scratching their heads. And this is a sentence that you've probably heard in English. It is harder for a rich man to get into heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. You ever heard that translation? That makes no sense.
You say that, actually. Yeah, you said that before. No,
right.
It makes perfect sense to me. I mean, from a theologic standpoint, it makes perfect sense.
But camel is Gimel, which is the third letter of the alphabet. If you look at the picture of a Gimel, it sort of looks like trying to move a couch up a stairs. It's kind of funny.
No, I remember it on the dreidel, the Gimel character on the dreidel.
And there is a letter, Kof, which literally is the eye of the needle. So if you say it is harder for rich men to get in heaven for the letter Gimel to thread through the eye of the Kof, now you're using the pictures of letters of the alphabet to give you the visual idea. But they took Gimel to mean camel, which is actually what is the Gimel's named after, and they took the name eye of the needle, which is what the letter Kof is supposed to represent, and they made it's harder for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. And you go, what the hell is that supposed to? It was the letters of the alphabet that you're threading the Gimel through the Kof.
Well, I've seen some esoteric translations of different things in the Bible or different theologic writings, and they break it into the actual periodic table and the chemical makeup of the universe, the basic building blocks.
They didn't know that. They didn't know.
Oh, they did. How do you know they didn't know that, Barry?
Because you would have been able to pick it out and decode it. Now I'll tell you one thing though, the name Adam, you know, when you say the blessing over the bread, or not the blessing over the bread, the blessing over the vegetables, you say Borei Pri Ha'adamah, the fruit of the earth. Adamah is the earth, literally Adamah is earth, but not just any earth, it's red earth. It's got minerals in it.
Right.
Adam's name is the same root as Adamah, earth. And the reason is the red earth is because what makes the humans, distinct from the animals, is we can blush. You can see when we're excited and the blood runs to our face, the iron in the blood makes us blush.
Right. So
And
you're stating my point.
Adam's name is he who blushes, because of the red, and it's the iron, in the earth that gives you the blood red that, you can see humans can become embarrassed and blush.
I'm just saying that it's a hard concept to swallow, but pre-Diluvian time, there could have been very advanced knowledge societies that have existed in many, many time periods that have been wiped out over time, reconfigured, wiped out, reconfigured.
Right.
And in that ideology, the thing that was kept was these esoteric sort of translations that are confusing, but if they can be translated,
Yeah.
and we can go back in time to, knowledge that we have yet to discover or correlate to our current understanding,
Yeah.
that really could add to civilization in quite a huge, the contributions the possibilities are just unimaginable.
But they did, they had words for earth, air, fire, and water, and they had the names of the gems. They understood wood and metals and rocks and whatever. So yeah, they had words for substances, including, when you say breath, when you inhale and exhale, the word halo.
Yeah, you've explained these things, but I'm saying, imagine this times every word that's ever existed. So if you go back to the ancient Egyptians, what's going on? Why did they create a hieroglyphic language? And was it actually translated properly with the Rosetta Stone, or is it just a misnomer?
Oh, well, as far as I know, the real Rosetta Stone, which had 3 languages, had a passage in 3 languages. I don't know for sure if one of them was hieroglyphics. I don't think it was. But the Aramaic and the Egyptian hieroglyphics and the Proto-Hebrew language alphabet, because they all have the same name. Alphabet, aleph, bet. These were literally the same words for the first 2 letters of the alphabet. The alphabet's named after the first 2 letters, and
right,
so they had the same name.
What about polytext and ancient Sanskrit? I'm just saying that there was some sort of information language that got lost in translation throughout the years.
Oh yeah, a lot of it got lost. And that's why the Rosetta Stone was so important, because it translated between 3 seemingly unrelated languages.
Yeah.
Not one is simply a dialect of the other.
But what if I guess what I'm trying to say is, if there's languages yet to be discovered, such as the sperm whales clicking languages.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And the language of bugs, the signaling of chemicals in different bug colonies, whether it be bees or ants, so on and so forth.
The dance of the bees. Do
Yeah.
you remember when they figured out the dance of the bees and the direction and the distance to where the flowers were?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so they've been trying to, this is very hard work to figure out how to decode these signals in other, representations. But the fact that the clicks of the sperm whale, it was the gap, it was the delay. It was like telegraphs. Telegraph is long and a short and a gap between symbols. This one, it's the gap is in the coda was the meaning. The meaning was in the gaps, just like drumming.
Yeah. But what if we figured out some secret language of the sun, just to extrapolate further, of the signals that are coming out of large corona flares of the sun?
Oh yeah.
And we start figuring out there's a signaling from planets and from suns that's creating another language outside of what we understand. I'm just saying that the possibilities are endless of different communication aspects that we've just missed all these years.
Yeah, the point is whether they're communicating in a round trip communication or whether they're simply revealing their makeup. So mostly we look at the signals from the sun and we say, from that we can infer the interior, what's going on in the interior of the sun. The interior of the sun has to be this way because that was generating, the flares and all that stuff. Whether or not it's round trip, that's a whole nother story.
It's fascinating to start thinking in that term of there's a whole nother language going on around us that we have yet to understand.
Well, for example, they now understand that trees and other plants communicate through chemicals in the roots or pheromones.
Yes.
They know now that there is a that one gives off a signal that the other one decodes and it makes an adaptation because of it, like drought or whatever, you know. So they worked out that there is this communication. For example, I think it's a tiger. On the back of the ears of a tiger is a white spot. And if you're a predator approaching a tiger from the back and the ears are up, it looks like great big eyes, because the white spot on the back of the ears looks like it's a big eye. And that turns out to make the predator afraid, because it looks like it's a big animal. And the cowl where the, I can't remember what you call it, where, you know, the back of the neck, the hairs on the back of the neck go up, makes like a cowl. It makes your head look bigger. And so you say, oh, this is a big prey, I shouldn't go after it. And if you look in the Disney villains all have a big cowl on their, you know, on their garment. Same deal. Makes them look fearsome.
Yep. And what about all the things that we don't see because of the different spectrum of, you know, the magnetic spectrum for the way bugs are seeing the world?
Oh yeah,
electromagnetically.
yeah,
It's
yeah. The bees can see in the ultraviolet because the flowers stand out in ultraviolet. If you photograph them in ultraviolet, they're like neon.
yeah.
And
So
the
there's been, you know, documentaries and specials of going into the woods and filming, you know, in the rainforest, whatever, in
Right.
different spectrums of light.
Right.
And they just found a squirrel, I think it's in Virginia or somewhere, that's actually ultraviolet that they didn't know because they've never shined a light on it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
with in other words, imagine the whole world lighting up of a whole nother paradigm that we never even could even imagine in our wildest dreams electrochemically.
Yeah. The song of the humpback whale. I mean, they've known about the song of the humpback whale. Nobody's been able to figure out, you know, how to map it into a message. But then on the other hand, people chant. And, you know, what's, you know, is a Gregorian chant sending a message, or is it just something that binds them together, that they get into sync?
Yeah.
And,
well, if you study different cultures, when I went to the Tibetan village in India, they would make the young doctors chant the entire library of the medical establishment from the Buddha. And they didn't have to read it and understand it the way we do in the West. They had to chant it and embody the information into their cells.
Yeah, if you add rhyme and prosody, it makes you able to memorize long texts. If you don't add the prosody and the rhyming, then it's much harder to memorize anything.
Yeah.
That's why when you sing a song, you have to start at the beginning. People can't pick up a song in the middle. They have to start from the beginning and, you know, play it from the beginning. And if they get the rhyming and the melody, then they can recite the lyrics and sing the whole song.
Right. Well, we're like we're like a large language model. We're just following down that trail.
Exactly.
And if we start in the middle of the trail, as a rapper or a poet,
right.
I've tried many times to go to different parts of the song.
Yeah.
And my brain will glitch and I'll go to the second verse and it will, it's really hard to go.
Right. Because the rhyming and the prosody is what helps you generate the next verse, the next segment.
Like ChatGPT.
Exactly. So I think there's a lot of insight that comes out of this stochastic prediction. And what I learned today is that they have this parameter called temperature. You know, that temperature parameter that's in the stochastic predictor?
No, I don't.
That it basically, you know, if you have an exponential distribution that decays fast or decays slow, but it's a one parameter distribution, tells you how fast or how slow should you decay the exponential. That's the temperature. And what it is that if the temperature is low, it chooses the most likely successor. If the temperature is higher, it will then take a wider distribution and more likely choose the less likely successors. So as you raise the temperature, which is simply a parameter, you will get more and more creative interpretations and less predictable ones. And the thing about Bard, as opposed to ChatGPT, in Bard, you can say, what are the temperatures of your 3 versions? And you can tell it, please make me a regenerated with a temperature of 5 or whatever. And so it will generate one that's more loosey-goosey in terms of predicting the next words. So you can actually tell it what temperature you want, how loose you want it to make the next choice.
I think you can do the same thing with ChatGPT. You just have to know the prompts on how to tell it to do that.
You may be right. I haven't found out how to tell ChatGPT. I should try it.
Yeah, try it. Practice with explain it back to me in this parameter, or the only setting that I use is ages. So explain it to me as a 14-year-old versus as an 8-year-old.
Yeah, I did that today. I prompted it. Everybody has heard of this term, large language model, LLM. Please explain an LLM as to an 8-year-old. I gave it that. And the first time I pasted it into Facebook, I chose the most succinct one of the 4 versions. And the guy says, that doesn't sound like an 8-year-old's version. And then I thought, oh, I should look at the other 2 versions. And one of them explicitly said, now, if I were doing this for an 8-year-old, here's an analogy I would use. It went into more detail. And then I said, what's the difference between version 1, 2, and 3? And it said, oh, it's the temperature. And the temperature is 0.5, 1, and I don't know, 1.5 or something. It gave me the numbers. It actually told me the temperature numbers. And then I found out I could tell it. I haven't tried that with ChatGPT yet.
Well, I can't wait to say, explain it to me as if I'm a humpback whale, and then transfer it in through this sound device, and let's see what it does.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I mean, you can talk to a dog where the prosody of talking to the dog is what matters and not the words. Well, you're just the ugliest thing I ever saw, so you and thinks you're being very friendly, and there are a lot of nursery rhymes. This is interesting. In a nursery rhyme, the melody of the nursery rhyme is very soothing, but the words can be very mean.
Oh yeah.
And I found one. I found one that was in Gaelic, and I love this. I love this song, but it was in Gaelic, and I went to get a translation of it into English, and the song is, the mother is singing to the baby what a terrible person the father was.
Oh, that sounds about right.
It's really amazing, because it never occurred to me that the words were going to be very mean story about the father, but sung in a way that's very soothing to the baby.
Right.
So that's where I began to realize popular music, if you're telling a sad story, the lyrics are a tragedy. In popular music, the music is always in a major chord, major key. So the music sounds positive and upbeat, even if the lyrics are a tragedy. And there's only one national anthem that's in a minor key. Almost every national anthem is a march in a major key, except one country has a national anthem in a minor key, and the lyrics are about hope. You know which one it is?
They flipped it, went the opposite. No, which one is it?
So I'll tell you the name in the language of that country. The word hope is Hatikva.
Hatikva.
I guess Israel.
Exactly, it's Israel.
Yeah.
And the lyrics are in Hebrew, and it's in a minor key, and it's about hope. And
but doesn't it explain a lot about the culture? I mean, that's so Jewish. Like growing up around Jewish people, that is such a Jewish thing to do.
Now, what's odd is that you grow up Jewish and they don't explain to you, by the way, the Israeli national anthem is about hope, and it's the only, they don't tell you it's the only one in a minor key. And it's Bedřich Smetana's The Moldau. The music is from Bedřich Smetana, the Moldau, which is the name of a river in Slovakia. And the thing about the Moldau River, there's a confluence of two rivers that are very different colors, and they merge at a certain point. Sophia. I can't sort of, I mean, I sort of remember the lyrics in Hebrew, but I couldn't give you the translation. But it's in a minor key, and it's about the confluence of two rivers that intermix, that are very different constituents of the river, because they start from different places, and they have different minerals and different colors, and then they mix at a certain place and becomes the Moldau, but it's in a minor key. So there's a lot of symbolism in it.
I'm wondering if there could be a transformer between classical music and lyrics of like creating a new language out of the chord changes in classical music.
You could probably prompt ChatGPT to make music, to make a song parody which fuses two different genres which are normally not hybridized. Because fusion is literally, that's literally what fusion means. You take two genres and you intertwine them, you braid them, and you can make braids of fusion music that are
the idea of that Gödel Escher Bach book.
Exactly.
Yeah. I
So
think that's,
yeah.
Are we there now? I mean, is that where we're at? Is what Douglas Hofstadter was talking about? Can we do this now with these?
I think you can, when you tell Philomena, when you tell ChatGPT to render something as if it was in the style of Philomena Kunk, or if it's in the style of Shakespeare, or in the style of Tom Lehrer, you could probably tell it to try to do a braid where every other verse, intertwines. And in fact, there is classical music. Let's see if I can remember the one that I know about. There's a piece of classical music. I don't know if it's Ravel or one of them. It starts off with a motif that is in one kind of motif, and then the next one is in a different motif, which musically clashes. So it goes from two motifs that clash, and then the last part of it, they somehow get into what's the word in music where they go together, they don't clash? The opposite of clash.
Harmonize?
Yes, harmonize, not harmonize, but yeah. So there's a piece of music where you get two versions of it from two different parts of the orchestra that clash, and then there's a very subtle key change.
A resolution?
What is it?
A resolution?
Yeah, there's a key change at the end where they are played in sync and they don't clash. And I wish I could remember which piece of music it was, because it was some years ago that I looked at that. But that's one of the things you can do with music, is you can take non-harmonic motifs and then somehow tweak them, and then they go together. They harmonize by a subtle key change. And there's a few in classical music that have that trick. And maybe after a while I'll remember what exact piece of music it was, because it's probably been 20 years since I remember looking at that.
Well, I just remember lying in the rainforest in Ecuador and hearing the plethora of bugs and their songs, and then somehow they kind of all sort of, like, throughout the night they would harmonize, and then they would come together,
Right.
and then go away from each other. And it was, I remember somewhere I have a recording of it, but it was the most interesting sounds I'd ever heard, because there was so many different diverse bugs. It was just like, I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah, you go from a cacophony I think sonority is the word I'm looking for. Sonorous and cacophonous, where they clash, and then they're sonorous, I guess is the word I'm looking
Yeah,
for.
it's like when you look at the fireflies and they're all going in different ways, looks
Right.
random, and then they start to synchronize.
They
And then,
sync up, yeah. So if you're dancing, you got to dance in sync. Phase, yeah, to phase lock. They get phase lock syncing in the dance. And mating dances are, can you sync up? And when the mating dance gets synced, then that's a successful mating. And if they don't sync up, then the mating dance fails and you don't mate. There was a guy who was trying to bring back the sandhill cranes from western Nebraska, and he had a sandhill crane. He had a couple of chicks that he had raised independently of each other, and they didn't learn the mating dance because they were orphans. And there was this was in like a natural history magazine, and the guy who knew the mating dance was doing the mating dance with one of the sandhill cranes. So he was sort of undulating. He was just sort of a lithe, skinny kid, not a kid, and he was doing the mating dance and trying to get the other sandhill crane to imitate it so that it would then mate with the real one.
oh wow,
It's a real funny story. I went back to try to find the story after 40 years. I couldn't find it, but I remember the photograph of this guy doing this mating dance with this, because sandhill cranes are big. They're like the size of ostriches. And so they're about the same size, and he's trying to dance with it to get it to learn the moves.
yeah, I remember it. There was a TED talk where a guy had talked about crows coming in his backyard, and his friend said, "I want to shoot him with a BB gun or whatever, get rid of the crows." And during a little dinner conversation, he said, "Why can't you train the crows to do what you want?" So he built a vending machine for crows to give them food. And it made me start thinking, could we have some sort of, in the animal kingdom where the squirrels and the crows come to a stadium and pick up all the trash after the people leave?
Yeah, I suppose. You've seen the
'Cause
videos where the
that's-
guy builds the obstacle course for the squirrel.
Yeah, Mark Robler.
Yeah, look, I mean, he over a period of, I guess, a year, he builds this really, really long obstacle course. And the squirrel learns to navigate it to get to the seeds at the end of it.
Yeah, but that line of thinking where we're harmonizing with nature, instead of them being a nuisance,
Right.
they're actually a functional part of human society as much as we're a functional part of the animal society.
Yeah. The so-called whispering metaphor, where you learn to whisper in the language of the horse or whatever it is and establish a bond.
I think that's quite profound, how we would build societies of the future, interacting with the animal as opposed to them being pests and nuisance, something that we all work together.
Yeah, exactly. So the interspecies languages and intersystem languages, yeah, I think that these pattern recognition systems, because these are patterns, right? So if you can get an abstract representation of the pattern, then you can take the abstract representation of the pattern and express it in any of the other ways of expressing it, whether it's words or music or lyrics or dances or whatever it is, but it's the same pattern.
Yeah.
You keep the underlying pattern. I mean,
It just made me think. So my brain is just going in different directions. I'm sort of randomly thinking of if you had a pickup truck that had a little box on the back, and different animals could come into your car and take a ride with you, they could have different migration patterns with humans as they travel around.
There was a guy who had a little light aircraft, and he was using it to train some species of birds to migrate.
Yeah,
I think it was a movie. It was a movie about that. I don't know. It might have been Geeks.
I remember that the guy with the ultralight.
Yeah, the ultralight aircraft and the migration of, it was geese or ducks, or I don't know what they were, but some species of migratory birds. He was leading them to migrate where they had somehow lost their migratory directions, or something had gone haywire with the migration, and he revectored them again. Oh, maybe because the place that they were migrating to was destroyed or something, and he led him to a different place, something like that. Forget exactly the
Yeah.
details.
I remember what you're talking about. I'm just saying, if you start thinking in that line of more merging our culture with their culture
Right,
and allowing for, certain fish species are dying in one part of the ocean, they
Right.
take a ride in a tanker that's delivering, cars or oil or something,
yeah,
and then they get repopulated in different coves and different places of the ocean. That would be very interesting.
yeah. Yeah, so the ability to recognize abstract patterns in different symbols and mate them up, that's a very powerful technique, and which neural networks are good at.
Yeah.
Encoding the pattern in some firing sequence in a neural network, and then saying that phenomenon in that domain and that phenomenon in that domain, they're analogous because they have the same pattern. That's reasoning by analogy or metaphors. That's like saying the clicks are like, the drum kit.
Yeah.
Same pattern, same temporal pattern.
Well, they might be more complex than we could ever imagine. I think, if you look at the evolution of the whales, I think in that article it said their brains have evolved over a longer period of time than human brains.
Right. Yeah. And the pattern recognition the brain architecture is optimized for that kind of pattern recognition.
Yeah. I think that was the whole plot of one of the Star Trek movies, that the information was kept in the whales.
Okay, I don't remember.
It was a bad Star Trek movie, but it was I
I think I know which one
Star
you mean.
Trek
Is that's the one in San Francisco, maybe?
Yeah, they had to
Yeah.
like transfer the whale. That was the plot of the movie. It was silly, but that kind of idea that there's different species of creatures on this planet that hold wisdom and knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, migratory patterns in birds. I mean, that's how they survive the seasons. If there weren't seasons, they wouldn't need to migrate. But
Mhm.
the migration pattern, and the fact that for example, was it the red-winged blackbird? I can't remember. One of them, there was a guy at Cornell in the ornithology group was trying to figure out how do they know to navigate on different conditions. And they had 3 different methods. They could detect the magnetic strength of the magnetic field of the Earth. They had a magnetoreceptor basically in the nose. They could then also get the sound from the wind flowing over the undulations of the Earth. It gave you different sounds in different sections, and then they could get the position of the sun in the sky, and maybe polarization of light. And so they had, I think he had 3 or 4 different navigation channels, and they would combine whichever channel was giving them the best information. That's what they would do. And he even put opaque contact lenses on them, and they could fly to within, I don't know, 100 feet of their roost. These are homing pigeons, I guess. And then because they had frosty contact lenses, they couldn't see, so they sort of a helicopter down to the ground, and then sort of like blind, they sort of try to find their way back to their roost. But he showed that each part of the journey was relying on a different modality of navigation.
Oh, wow.
He gave a talk at Bell Labs. It was one of the most amazing talks I attended at Bell Labs, is how homing pigeons navigated, all the different techniques that they relied on, and how they did the research to prove it, that they could detect the magnetic field, that they could use near vision, that they could detect polarization of light, and they could detect he proved that they could respond to these stimuli and integrate all these different modalities and navigate.
Yeah, I think that would be a different way of engineering and creating mechanical devices that can do more analog type of navigation.
I mean, they tape bar magnets to the back of them so to screw up the ability to pick up the Earth's magnetic field. Because then they had this strong, when he did that, they lost the ability to navigate by the magnetic field. They couldn't figure out which way is north anymore. So he had all these ways of screwing up each of the modalities.
Yeah.
And then showed that if you take away that modality, then that part of the journey they can't do.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are you working on, Sam? I'm hearing clicking.
Sam
you good?
Sam has 2 channels on, and one of them is making noise. I could mute him. I think, yeah.
No, it's okay. I should probably go soon just because I got to check in. My daughter's growing up so fast. She sort of needs more attention at this moment in time.
Well, yeah. So you can watch pattern recognition in your daughter, see the different complexities and modalities of pattern recognition.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm watching it. It's fascinating. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I've never experienced.
That's what Piaget did. Piaget in the 1920s watched his children learn, and he developed his learning theory models from watching his own children learn. You're doing what Piaget did.
She just started last month repeating back 3 to 4 words at the end of every sentence, and then watching my reaction to see, did I get that right? But just literally mimicking almost perfectly. Her mimic skills are very good.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, that's the bonding. That's the bonding mechanism, is mimicry.
Yeah, it's to me right now, it's very important that she mimics behaviors that will help her adjust to the world at this moment in time.
And therefore you learn to model the behavior you want her to imitate.
Correct.
You become very, very keen on, I'm going to be imitated. What do I want to model?
Yep. It's really interesting.
It's fascinating. Mimicry, mimesis.
Yeah.
So you learn to articulate your words. You learn to use vocabulary words that are within her scope in terms of meaning and number of syllables and how hard it is to distinguish. And so you learn to speak in complete sentences, but short sentences with primary color words.
Yeah, right now her vocabulary is cool, cute, and awesome. Everything is, oh, that's cute. Oh, that's cool. That's awesome.
And then every once in a while you introduce a new word.
Yeah.
Very carefully introduce a new word for another nuance. That's a new distinguishing nuance.
Yep.
And it works the other way around. The parents pick up the words that the kids make up.
Yep.
The kids will make up words, and you hear them say this word and finally figure out what it means. And then you use it in the same context.
Yeah, the one that I picked up was her word for water is wuggle, because it's a combination of bottle and water. So it's wuggle.
Do you remember the Annie Sullivan movie with Helen Keller with finger spelling water? Famous scene.
I sort of remember it, but I don't remember the visual. I remember reading it.
Very, very powerful scene where Annie Sullivan is trying to teach Helen Keller as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, how was she? And she's not getting anywhere. And finally they have the breakthrough, and she's at the pump, the water pump. And she puts her hand in the water and spells water and says water. And that's when Helen Keller gets it. That's the moment.
That's where she spelled it on her, she drew it on her hand, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
She felt the water. She felt the water. She said the word and she spelled it all at the same time. Very, very powerful scene.
I think that's kind of where we're at with when Sam mentioned the word singularity.
Yep.
That just keeps coming up as that powerful moment when the language model can understand that braid, that fugue between the multiple things. That's
when the two things mesh, they braid, they interlock, and you get the interlocking in the multiple dimensions at the same time. That the phoneme and the feeling of the water and the finger spelling of the water, they're all symbols of the same thing.
Yeah, I think where politics, ethics, and logic and mathematics and economics all have to braid together, that will
Yeah.
be a moment.
Yeah. And
They're not
I
separate.
think these neural networks are going to facilitate that at a high speed once we get the neural networks to represent the same information in multiple representations: visual, audio, text,
Yeah.
dynamic dance. You know, when they get them all in the same pattern, in sync, then you'll get the mapping across multiple domains, the analogies, the
Yeah.
pattern language.
Yeah, well, there's some new software that's come out. I think a group of Hollywood professionals, Steven Spielberg is the most famous in that group, but it's called Wonder Dynamics. And they've used the AI to do all of the hard work of visual effects of taking a person walking, and then you grab an avatar, drag and drop it onto the person, and all of that hard work of mapping the dimensions of the person's skeleton is now mapped to the avatar. And I think
Yep.
the storytelling that's going to come out of that is going to be fantastic.
Yep.
And another company called Runway ML is using the next generation of text prompting. Instead of to a still picture, it's video. So
Yep.
as that generates and gets better,
Yep.
we'll be able to see photorealistic movies that were just thought of in someone's mind
Exactly.
of words that become visuals that are actually accurate. And Adobe just gave their conference for actual copyright free visuals because they were stealing from everything on the internet, and they're figuring out how to watermark it as AI.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's getting interesting.
Yeah. So painting, so all the arts, music and dance and painting and I don't know, poetry, all these different modalities, they're going to somehow intertwine them beautifully so that you can learn to speak all these parallel languages or decode all these parallel languages.
Yep.
You get them in harmonizing and in sync. And that's emotionally, that is very powerful when that happens. Did you hear how my voice cracks when I tell that story about Andy Sullivan and the water?
Yeah.
I can't tell that story without just falling to pieces emotionally.
Well, it's powerful. It's
It is.
that to me, I'm getting emotional just thinking about translating all of the animal languages into human society where people can understand it visually in some new movie where it's no longer, oh yeah, the plants talk to each other. Well, what does that mean? But then when you see a arc of a story of a little tiny sapling being fed water from a larger tree far away under a root system, and the Disney version of that is going to be really powerful. The Toy Story tree version.
It's very moving and very powerful, enlightening. It's really good, and it makes you feel connected to the world. It literally makes you connected.
Yeah. But I think is it the word anamorphizing? Is that a word? I don't know.
Yeah, there's anamorphic art. Have you ever seen? You've probably seen anamorphic art. You have on the ground on the table this thing that you can't see, and then there's a reflective column, a mirror that's either a cylinder or something that's distorted from a cylinder. And when you look in there, you see the reflection. Now you see the image. That's called anamorphic art. Have you ever seen?
No, what is that? I don't know anything about that.
So go on the internet and ask for some photographs of anamorphic art. You know how to spell it?
Oh.
ANAMORPH. Look for what you'll see is that there's an image on a flat surface that you can't make out, and then there is a vertical curved mirror like a cylinder. And when you look in the reflection through the cylinder, you see the picture in normal perspective.
Oh, wow. I'm looking at it right now.
And you can do it with a cylinder as the mirror or some more complicated vase-like shape or whatever.
Oh, this is fascinating.
There's a Escher print where he's got a mirrored sphere, and you see the reflection of him in the mirrored sphere, and he's got the distortion, And he worked it out, not with math, he just worked it out. And that's called anamorphic art. You don't see a lot of it because it's kind of tedious to make it.
Oh, this is amazing.
It's a mapping. It's a mapping between two different representations where you have a distortion, which is undistorted. By the way, FM radio, they do distortion. The mapping from the audio to the modulation in FM is not linear. It's intentionally non-linear. And then you map it back. And what happens is that you get better fidelity and less noise.
This line of thinking is, I'm sorry, you just blew my mind because there's a type of art I saw in New York that if you look, they would take junk, and if you look at it from one angle, you see that it's a piece of work.
Right.
But from any other angle, it just looks like junk.
Gibberish, right. Yeah, it's perspective. Everything lines up from one angle, and every other angle just looks like random stuff. Yeah. The Science Museum had quite a few of those pieces of you had to get down at the end and look on it edge on. And if you look at it from the side, it just pieces here and there, but they all it's like a jigsaw puzzle. All pieces fit together when you look at them from the right angle.
That's what I'm thinking of. When Sam said the singularity, my mind went to, there's so much distortion of information in the world that we're modeling through language that doesn't quite capture the reality or the truth of what's really going on.
It's hard to do a jigsaw puzzle in spoken language, because in spoken language you turn a sentence into gibberish where the phonemes are in random order.
Right.
But if you put the phonemes in the right order, you got a sentence that you can diagram.
That's why that book, the wholeness and the implicate order of David Bohm, I think that's what he was trying to explain in the first few chapters of that book.
It could be. It could be. I mean, Esteban Trev will take a perfectly good paragraph and he'll take all the phonemes and scramble them, and he will then write a passage in which you get all the same words in random order, and you can't figure out what he's talking about. He does it on purpose.
What's wrong with him?
Well, that's a very good question. And I think the reason he does that is because if I talk in very academic prose, very scholarly and academic prose, he will scramble it, and he will repeat all the same bits in random order so you can't figure out what it says.
Well, maybe his brain is wired differently. Is it?
He does it on purpose because he can write in perfectly ordinary English complete sentences with punctuation and spelling, but more often than not, he will take whatever somebody said and degenerate it into gibberish. He does it on purpose. I don't know why, but he is very idiosyncratic about doing that.
I wonder if that's what Colin was trying to do all the time, because it seems like he would take he could speak perfectly clear, but then he would, I don't know. That's interesting. Just the communication of different people of how, like for my brain right now, it's thinking abstract out there, but I would have to take, I need a couple weeks to take all my thoughts, clarify them, and put it into prose.
Yeah. And what I would do is I would take his, I called them pipelines of gibberish. I would take one of Esteban's screeds where it was all scrambled in random order and no punctuation and all that stuff. And I would take, it's basically a word cloud. It's basically, I would take a word cloud and I'd throw it into ChatGPT and I say, can you make a plausible paragraph out of this collection of words? And it could, but it wasn't what the original stuff was. It was just some other assemblage into complete sentences using the same vocabulary. And I think the reason that Esteban would do that is because he was allergic to scholarly academic prose. And I think because when he tried to go to college in Monterey, University of Monterey, and he flunked, and he became antagonistic towards the professors. And so he would take academic prose and gibberishize it.
Is that what E.E.
Intentionally.
Cummings was doing as a poet?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I'm not really sure what E.E. Cummings was doing, except they put everything in lowercase. I know that.
Well, he was creating different, from what I understand of his work, it was different syntax that meant something to him that you would have to really study his syntax to get the meaning behind. It was sort of a code.
I wrote a piece in which I had something from E.E. Cummings on one side and interleaved with it on the other side in normal capital letters and all that stuff was sort of the inverse of it. And I published that. I think I wrote that maybe 30 years ago. It's up on my website. I can pull it up for you. But it was trying to remember. I mean, I could dig it up. I can't recite it from memory because I can't memorize that stuff. But I made up another poet. So he's E.E. Cumming, and I made up another poet called I Am Going. And
Okay.
I Am Going has his poem on this side, and E. Cumming has it, and they basically each one inverts the verse of the other.
Yeah, sort of a mirror of
Yes,
the other.
it's sort of a symmetric mirror image, or some kind of a linguistic inverse. So you had E. Cumming and I Am Going side by side, each one inverting line by line the other. And then,
Before the conversation gets to the top of the hour, I was wondering, I know Sam's, if you can listen, if you're here, you're very busy at this moment, but if we could schedule some time in the future and see if all of these conversations we've ever had here at GCC have value, and then find out, 3 months from now, if there is a service that could just grab the information and translate it, or how do we store the value of all these conversations? That's a question I have for you.
The extraction of meaning out of this has been something that has been anticipated. And so now with GPT and others, it's looking pretty close.
Yeah.
So there's now probably about 600 or 700 of these videos that it could crawl through.
Yeah, I'm saying, do you want to schedule a time to stop, look at what technologies are available, and can we feed it through those computer systems? And
we could.
okay.
It's a multi-step process, it sounds like to me, because there's the collection, there's the identification, there's the trade-off. Somebody has to do it. It's going to take a lot of time.
Do you want to raise money, meaning get a grant for this? If we thought about it now, by the end of the year, or maybe by August or September, we would have the time to raise that money, and then also let it be a research project for maybe Stanford University. I don't know.
They'll have to see if there's any value out of this.
I don't know. I think it's worth asking if they, maybe the kids there say, hey, this would be a fun project. I'd like to do it, and get a grant from somewhere. I don't know. I don't know how it works. I was wondering if you have ideas.
It'd be curious to understand, how many forums there are that have been really kind of skirted around this whole topic for about 5 or 6 years, whatever. Yeah, it's been about 5, almost 6 years now.
Yeah.
Joshua, look in the chat where I put a URL, Utney Bury, Cummings.txt.
I'm getting it right now. Open link. I'm going to
This is one where you can have 2 people, each one reads the left side and then one responds. It's like stimulus response. So one person would read the left side and the other one would then do the right side. Did Joshua
I think this is perfect fodder for these putting this into some sort of visual prompting thing. In other words, what would this look like as a visual story would be fascinating.
Yeah. But you can imagine, remember when you did one with Stacy where you were reading, you could have 2 parties, one in sort of the authoritarian, I am going, beef, it's what's for dinner. And then, then E. Cummings, serial encounters with life. And you would alternate.
What I'm saying is now you have the ability to have actors that don't exist, but they can have actual facial structure and voice inflection in this AI space.
And you would scroll the script here. but you know, I
Yeah.
don't, I mean, yeah, yeah, you can see at the bottom, E. Cummings, 1940, I am going, 1999. So I wrote that in 1999, the left side, the I am going side, and interleave them. And you can see that each one is sort of the linguistic inverse of the other.
Explain to me, I'm looking at it right now, just the first line, beef, that's what's for dinner, as freedom is for breakfast. So the second line is the inverse.
So the E. Cummings is all lowercase. That's the original. And
Oh,
on the
okay, I
left
get
si-
it now.
And the left side where everything is capitalized, that's what I made up for the I am going made up poet. And each one is sort of is presenting a perspective which is sort of the mirror image of the others. As freedom is a breakfast food, so power is uneven tide, or truth can live with right and wrong, and falsehood dies with yes or no. Or molehills are from mountains made, and moles build burrows underground. So you see each one is
I
an
got
echo
it.
of the other, but the whole mood and semantics is inverted.
Long enough and just so long.
Small enough and just that hidden.
hidden.
Will being pay the rent of seem? Won't become earns the wages of sin. You have to sort of rehearse this because
Yeah.
and genius please the talent gang, or ignorance annoy the foolish one. So you
So
see
was this small lowercase, was that all one E. Cummings poem, or were you picking
no,
different
the
parts
stuff
of the
on the
poem?
right, the stuff in lowercase is an actually E. Cummings poem. The
But
title
is
was
it unedited, or is it exactly as is?
It's as far as I know, it's exactly because I simply took it from the internet. You
So
could
in other
probably
words, the E. Cummings poem would say, as freedom is a breakfast
breakfast
food,
food.
or truth can live with right and wrong,
Yeah,
or
go ahead.
molehills are.
Yeah, let's do a Google on that. Do a search for serial encounters with life.
I'm just not familiar with that poem, so I didn't know if you edited it.
No, I didn't. Let me see if I can
Okay.
find an actual page that it has it on it. I got to put E. Cummings in the search, or it's not going to find it.
Let me see if I can find it.
Because it's 1949, so it may be hard to find it today. Freedom is a breakfast food.
Okay.
Got to find a page where Google knows where it lives. Oh, there it is. Okay. Poetry
Oh,
Foundation.
okay. It's the first paragraph of one of his poems. That's
Yeah. So there's a
I found it.
Poetry Foundation by E. As freedom is a breakfast food.
Yeah. That's the one I got.
Or truth can live with right and wrong, or molehills. Yeah, there. Yeah, you see, it's just the first stanza or so. Or
Yeah.
first, I don't know.
That's why I was confused, because I'm like, that doesn't look like a full E. Cummings
It was
poem.
just the first stanza.
Yeah, that makes sense, because his writing style is each stanza is a complete thing, but it's not line by. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So I took the first stanza of As Freedom is a Breakfast Food, which is a real poem, and I basically, mated it or mirrored it, with one on the other side, and there you have it. And where does that faculty of mocking or satirizing or inverting or mirroring, and changing the mood or the tone, or that's, there you have it.
Yeah, he speaks in metaphor. That's why it's
Right,
Yeah.
and so I am going is very down to earth, not not very metaphorical. It's just trying to read it, trying to invert it with a literal reading of the words.
No, I can see what you're doing. I'm picking up what you're putting down. I got it there. It's you just have to finish it. You only did the first stanza. You got to
Yeah, I
finish
only
the
did
whole rest of it.
because it's hard to do that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But you could imagine teaching Chat GPT. You would give it that as a sample and
Mhm.
explain the premise of the mapping, and then say, please finish this.
Sure.
Please write the next stanza, in that same pattern, the same mood. And the question is, could Chat GPT or Bard pick up the concept and
Yep.
then continue? Can
Well,
you do a continuation of it?
That's what I'm excited about with I'd like to discuss this further, but I believe with these plugin models, if you had a API plugin for Chat GPT with video that could access the video files, the MPEG-4 files, and then go ahead and use, say, Otter AI. So in other words, you could write a script that says, okay, access this giant list of, all of the videos that have ever been done from GCC, pull them all out into this, take the sounds of each person, pull that, transferring all that data. I think there could be a script where you could just set it and forget it and come back in a couple days and it might come up with something,
Yeah.
without too much work. At least translate it, get it into text, and then it would have to know the speaker. So that's why Otter AI is important in there.
Let me just see. I might go ahead and try that. I might just try taking the actual text from my page, copy the whole thing, go to Chat GPT. Chat GPT, can you generate a continuation of this interlaced pair of poems? And I'll paste it in and see if it works. I'm not too sanguine about this, but let's see what happens. Oops, I got to refresh. Trouble with this thing is if you don't use it for an hour, it loses the connection.
I think you're going to break Chat GPT. I apologize. I got to get back to the kiddo.
Right.
Sam, are you good? Are you complete? I'm not sure if you're in a good space or.
Yeah, this was kind of a rambling conversation, and I was just listening, but
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily need to go back to my notes at all. But it's almost 10,
Okay.
so
It's doing it. It's doing it. Now the thing is, it's not maintaining the upper lowercase distinction, but it does continue it. So let me just quickly. It says continuation. Serial encounters with life leave us hungry for more. We devour the beef for dinner, yet still yearn for something more. Freedom may be a breakfast food, but power comes in waves, sometimes crashing, sometimes calm, but always there in some way. Truth can coexist with right and wrong. It's blending it in a finer blend.
Ah.
It's not doing it the way I did it with alternating verses. It's sort of interleaving it within each line. For long enough and just so long, we hide ourselves away. Being pays the rent of seeming, but won't become earns the wage of sin every day. It's sort of got the idea, but it has departed from the pattern that I initially used. But it did do something with it.
Well, I'll check Facebook. If you play with it a little bit more, let me know if you get it to distinguish what is Barry and what is E.E. Cummings, and if it gets recognizes the pattern and can do the rest of the poem. I'd be fascinated to know.
Let me try with Bard just to see if Bard's any different. I'll just change the prompt from saying Chat GPT to Bard.
I'm going to check on the video of see what's going on with the. All right. Yeah, I'm
Looks
watching
like,
my daughter on her iPad and Cusella on her iPhone, and they're both just sitting next to each other on the computer.
I think that Bard did almost exactly the same thing. Maybe identical. Let me double check that.
Well, can I ask you a question, Bert? Do you think you could take a transcript from one of our GCC calls and have it actually identify who was the speaker by their languaging?
I don't know that it would have enough training data.
It would need,
Yeah, the newest version of Otter, I think, does identify the speaker. Let's see, does
but I'm
this
saying,
version do?
yeah, instead of using the actual vocal tone to identify the speaker, could it identify it by the language patterning of the speaker? The
Maybe.
way Stacy speaks, the way I speak.
Where is? Okay, let me just see, view full transcript. I think, let me just double check. Oh, there isn't, oh, wait a minute, there it is. How come I don't have the whole transcript? I'm only getting the current, how do I get the scroll back? I'm not getting,
So,
show
I have a
captions.
question for Sam before I go. Is it possible to publish the transcripts of all the calls at some point, or is that as far as a legal thing to make sure that the people that
I think he does.
identify them as anonymous? Would that be
I normally do as part of the meeting notes, but I've been so
Mhm.
behind because of my recent new responsibilities. I think I'm about a year behind on that. But in theory, I have done that.
Okay, I'm just saying if those were published, then someone else, if it was
There
at
are.
least
There are
published.
hundreds
Yeah,
already there.
okay. When you say it's there, where is it exactly?
I've published all the links in the GCC group, and they're in the Google Drive folder that I think you do have access to.
Okay, but they're not published out to the public where anyone could just grab them and use it for
They are. In
AI
fact,
modeling.
those notes is attached as a note to each of the YouTube videos. So if you go to one
Oh,
of the
wow.
videos going back a year ago for about 4 years, if you click on that link, it goes to the actual notes and it tells you who's there, and it gives you the transcripts and it gives you some of the notes that we took ourselves.
And that's on the YouTube?
That's on each YouTube video since about a year, going back about 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So technically someone could write a program going back through all those published YouTube.
Yes, that's right. That was always the intent.
Oh, wonderful, Sam. Thank you for doing that.
Mhm.
Holy shamoly, ChatGPT and Bard produce identical continuations, word for word identical.
That's
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Well, at least the first stanzas that I looked at so far, they're exactly identical continuations.
So they're using the same language model.
Well, they're using the same statistics of the prediction of the successive words, and they're using the same temperature. Now, if I change
Gotcha.
it, but that's astonishing. They have the identical neural network. Yes, journey on through life.
The same predictive model for the next word coming after.
Wait a minute. No. So we journey on through life, seeking answers to the unknown, encountering serial experiences. Yeah, they're identical. They're literally identical continuations.
So
Word for word.
who's copying who in that situation? Was
They're using the same
Bard, or?
model. They're using the same. They were trained on the same data, and they're using the same model. So they're generating the same predictions, and they're using the same temperature, because they're literally word for word identical continuations. I gave them the same prompt. Can you generate a continuation of this interlaced pair of poems? That was the same prompt, and they generated identical continuations word for word.
Wow. That's interesting.
They are
So-
twins. They are neural network twins with respect to at least that stuff.
What that makes me think, I mean, this is just me inferring, I have no idea, but were they actually programmed by the same group of people? I mean, why
They
are they?
must they must have been trained on exactly the same data set.
Hmm. So the piles of information were the same.
Yeah. I didn't realize that BART is based on Lambda, which is Google, I think. I think BART is based on Lambda, which is Google's implementation of GPT. But my God, it's identical continuations.
You need to publish that and put that out there because I think people would like to know that.
Genius may please the talent gang. I'm just double checking. Genius may please the talent gang. Same capitalization and everything. Same punctuation, but ignorance annoys the fool. But ignorance annoys the fool, like water that encourages flame. Like water that encourages, yeah, literally identical. Literally,
Oh, wow.
character for character identical. Punctuation and everything. And one's from Bard and one's from ChatGPT. Different
Well,
companies.
put that out. Yeah, publish that on your blog because I think people would like to know
Yeah.
these.
Isn't that amazing? Literally identical responses in poetry.
Well, I guess if you think about the parameters that were, it has to go through some sort of pathway that understands that type of language modeling, which is E. Cummings and you. So that same pathway is just the only pathway that it could figure out. That's why it's identical.
Identical prompts and identical continuations of the identical prompt. I mean, the two models are essentially twins. Right down to the last gene of their twinhood, at least with respect to this particular item. I mean, I haven't pulled that thing up for, I don't know, years, that the thing I wrote in 1999.
Yeah.
About 24 years ago.
Well, maybe they both, I wonder if they both read that, if that was published on the internet, if they both read that, so they both process it the same.
I doubt it, because it's on my server in my house in the living room. That, I mean, you saw where I gave you the link to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be very surprised. Well, even if it was in the database, the prompt to write a continuation of it, why would it have done that in advance? It wouldn't have.
No, it's supposed to be doing it on the fly. So
Right, it is doing it on the fly.
Oh, what a weird world we're living in. My mind is sort of blown. This week has kind of fried my brain in terms of what's coming next. I have no idea. I'm just waiting for someone to do something malicious with these plugins.
Hang on, I want to make sure that I plugged in the right thing. Did I plug in the right thing? Oh, you know what? I pasted in both. Okay. I take it back. When I pasted in both the prompt and the my mistake. I pasted in too much. Let me go back and try it again. Yeah, what happened is that when I did the paste, I pasted in the totality instead of just the first part of it.
That makes sense. That would be quite interesting. If they both did exactly the same thing, they would be the same language model.
Yeah, let me try to fix that. Yeah. I didn't realize that the paste that I copied and pasted longer than I should have. All right, let's try this again. Now it should be different. Okay, yeah, now it's generated a different continuation.
Okay,
Okay, yeah, I was mistaken. I had over pasted.
that's okay. It would be an anomaly. If it did do the exact same thing, I was saying you need to publish that because I think a lot of people would be interested to know that.
I didn't realize that I had copied and pasted the prompt and the answer from ChatGPT.
Got it. So are you enjoying Bard? Is it something that's actually fun to work with? Is it
Yeah, it's definitely different in useful, interesting ways, not profound ways. But for one thing, Bard can access the current internet, which ChatGPT can't. So if the prompt involves accessing background information,
Mhm.
Bard can go out and find more background information for the context. And I don't really know to what extent, it's doing that. So yeah, it
Yeah,
says,
have
I
you
like your continuation. I'll try to generate a different one. And then it generates a different continuation. But it had ChatGPT's continuation as part of the original prompt.
which started it on the same pathway, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, let me know if you get the Chat GPT connected to Bing. If you play with, I think that one's very different.
Yeah. I'm still on the wait list for Bing. I have the preview version before you're authorized. So you get a very limited version. If you go to, you have to be in the Edge browser and you have to go to bing.com in the Edge browser and you get a limited version of the Bing chat before you're off the wait list.
Yeah.
So I'm getting just what they call the preview version of it.
Yeah, I think a lot's going to be coming out soon when it goes out of beta and gets to the general public. I think they're going to fix the bugs.
Yeah. So so Bing is going to use GPT-4 and Bard, I guess, uses Lambda, which is, I don't know if Lambda is equivalent to GPT-4, GPT 3.5. I don't know which.
Yeah, my concern is the millions of people using this are being psychoanalyzed by the system, and where is that information going to go to politically for predictive
don't-
policing? And
I
We'll
don't ask
find
me.
out.
I have no clue.
we'll find out. I think if you rewatch that movie Minority Report, have you ever seen that movie?
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that movie. Yeah, pre-crime.
Yeah, I think that pre-crime thing is sort of politically. I mean, it's an obvious place to go to in society where.
Well, you know how
it's trying
people
to-
who live with each other can finish each other's sentences.
Mhm.
I mean, you get so used to somebody's pattern that you can finish their sentences, which means that they're no longer being co-creative anymore.
Right.
And I think that if you spend enough time with some generation of GPT, that you will no longer be surprised. You'll be able to anticipate what it's going to do, modulo synonyms and things like that.
Until they change the training data that it's trained on.
Well, and that's where the temperature parameter, because as you raise the temperature in the prompt, then it becomes more randomized in the generative sense. So you're going to get more hallucinations. See, as you increase the temperature, you get more hallucinations.
Yep.
More creative.
That's what my friend Chris was doing. He was changing it and it was hallucinating. And then it started saying, the weird stuff where it's, I don't like the way you're talking to me. You have these issues. And it started psychoanalyzing him. And he, kept messing with it. He was trying to push it to the limits.
Right. And that's where the guardrails, which override the generative part. So the guardrails will say, no, that's toxic. You can't say that. And so it'll block it. And whether you can turn off the guardrails or jailbreak the guardrails, I haven't tried to jailbreak the guardrails.
Oh, that's,
I pasted in one comment from Anne Marie, and I got a red card on it saying that violates our whatever criteria, and I had no idea why it got red carded. But one thing
Yeah.
that I pasted from Anne Marie got red carded, and wouldn't respond.
yeah, there was an example on a podcast where they were asking it, how much of a liquid you could put in the Grand Canyon to try to understand the size of the Grand Canyon. And they used a profanity and it wouldn't do it. But then when they used mayonnaise, it would do it. So how much mayonnaise can you put in? So, and then it went into the consistency of how you make the mayonnaise, et cetera, and so forth. But yeah, it's really interesting that the guardrail aspect is what needs to be fine-tuned before it can really come out to commercial use.
There was one snippet on Alan Thompson with Lita where she recited a poem that she made up, and it was bawdy.
Yeah.
It had words in it and content in it that would be considered not safe for work. And he went ahead and published it, but where the hell it came from, he didn't try to explain, why it had this departure into not safe for work body poetry.
Yeah, I think the regulation of this new AI world is going to be one of the most fascinating conversations in the public discourse.
Yeah.
Of what is reasonable to allow it to do to speak to everybody.
I mean, Mark Twain wrote a book called Notes from the Underground, and it's not safe for work stuff. It's really bawdy stuff, and I think you'd be hard pressed to go into a public library. Well, maybe in the adult section. I don't know, because he wrote it. We're talking about more than a century ago. But there were people who wrote perfectly bawdy stuff that's just, not for polite company. Even Mark Twain did.
What's the word you're using? Body? I don't know that word.
BAWDY.
Body.
BAWDY. Body. Define the word body. Define.
Yeah, I've never heard that word before.
BAWDY. This is to Bard. The word bawdy means coarsely humorous or vulgar, often used to describe jokes or stories that are sexually explicit or offensive.
That's a good word. I'm going to put that in my vocabulary. I like that. Body.
Yeah, it's an old word. I mean, it's a word probably has been around in the English language for centuries. And there is bawdy literature in the canon of Western literature. There is the bawdy material.
Yeah.
What
is it synonymous with the word vulgar?
It's a sin. Well, yeah. I mean, it's one of the definitions: coarsely humorous or vulgar. That was the short definition.
Is that would be a good type of comedy, bawdy comedy.
Well, that a lot of it is a lot of stand-up comedy in the nightclubs, where you could say, the words you can't say on television, and body function jokes, so that's pretty common in stand-up comedy for adult audiences in the nightclubs that are, small nightclub audiences. I mean, why else would you go to a nightclub for stand-up comedy if you could watch it on television? It's got to be cleaned up. And I never found it, it's what you call bathroom humor. I never found bathroom humor really all that entertaining. I don't really find it funny.
Well, it's got to be clever. If it's just bathroom humor for bathroom humor's sake, it's sort of cliche. Yeah,
and let's see, and I don't even know if you could ask for samples of it. You could try to ask ChatGPT or Bard for samples of classical body humor from classical, and I don't know I haven't attempted to see whether or not it will censor it or not.
Yeah. I'll have to check in on see how that goes, because I think that's what you just said is why why comedy clubs still exist.
But you remember the song from CeeLo Green when it won the Grammy Awards? They said the song otherwise known as "Forget You."
I don't know that song.
Well, that's not the correct That's not the actual lyric. It's not.
Oh, okay, I
Forget You.
gotcha.
And when they did the Grammy Awards, they had to say the song otherwise known as Forget You, because on television they couldn't actually say that.
Ah, interesting.
And it won a bunch of awards that year. And so it kept
Huh.
coming up, more than, because it was one of the most memorable song. And there's a video of a what do you call sign language? There's a deaf sign language person signing it. So the teacher puts on the record, and then the interpreter is actually signing the lyrics to this song. It's a funny video. It's on YouTube. I'm sure
Oh,
it's still on YouTube. In fact, there's one.
Yep. I listen to a lot of disgusting comedy. That's kind of what I ingest all the time. So
But when they get to the lyric, which is the Forget You, the sign language is this, which I think is Italian, but evidently it's American Sign Language.
Gotcha.
That's how you say it.
hi.
Hi.
Want
Hiya.
to say hi?
Hiya.
This is Barry.
Hi.
This is Barry.
She's not looking at the screen.
She's being funny. She goes,
She was. I can tell she wasn't looking at the screen. So.
No, she's just pretending not to know what you're saying.
Well, because she probably doesn't understand.
She's playing music.
Ukulele.
No, she's just being.
Actually, is that a ukulele?
This is her world right now.
Yep. Music.
Yep. Beautiful, yeah. Yay. All right, Barry, I'm gonna sign off.
Okay. Sam probably wants to go do it's 2
Cheers.
hours anyway, so I'm sure Sam wants to go too.
Okay. Well, hopefully I'll see you guys next week. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. Is it still there, Sam? I'll wait a minute to see if Sam wants to close out or not. Well, Sam, I'll give you a minute or two more to see if you're still there, and if not, I will. Let me just see if I. No. Can I turn off the recording? Nope. I can't turn off the recording and I can't end the session. Well, Sam, you're not there, and it's 15 minutes past the second hour. So I'm going to take my leave and just, I can't stop the recording and I can't stop the session. So see you tomorrow.